What if I told you the royal family just slammed the last door on Prince Harry and Meghan Markle? For good. Not quietly. Not behind palace walls. But in full public view, right before the entire world watches the Invictus Games return to British soil. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. And what if I told you this wasn't about rules, but revenge? Because according to insiders, this so-called final verdict was years in the making. And it wasn't Charles who made the first move. It was Harry. The calm before the verdict. It started like any other royal headline. Bland, polite, and official sounding. Their Royal Highnesses, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, shall not use the HRH style in connection with any upcoming public engagements, including the Invictus Games 2027. One sentence. That's all it took. But behind that sentence, a declaration of war. Now, imagine this. King Charles, sitting behind his ornate oak desk in Clarence House. The Invictus Games are months away, and he's just been handed a document, something his aides say he read 3 times. Slowly, carefully. His expression? Stone. His decision? Immediate. He takes out his pen, signs it. No HRH. Not for Harry. Not for Meghan. Not now. Not ever again. Why now? Why this? Why public? Let's be honest. This wasn't some random update on royal website protocol. This was a calculated, emotional move. A final hammer strike on a rift that has festered for years. And Charles didn't do it in private. He made sure it went public. Loud. Clear. And just in time for the Invictus Games to return to London, where Harry once stood shoulder to shoulder with veterans, waving the Union Jack, proudly bearing the HRH title he's now been stripped of. And the question we all have to ask is, why? Why now? Why, when millions of veterans and spectators are about to arrive in the UK to celebrate a cause Harry himself helped build? And perhaps most chilling of all, what does King Charles know that we don't? A title is never just a title. You might be thinking, but wait, didn't they already lose the HRH style back in 2020? Yes and no. In 2020, when Harry and Meghan stepped back as senior royals, they agreed to stop using their HRH titles. But they were still entitled to them. Legally, they remained his and her Royal Highness. The titles lingered, like smoke after fire, no longer used publicly, but still alive. That changed with this new verdict. King Charles has now moved to officially bar them from ever using those titles again. Not just in the UK, not just for the Invictus Games, but permanently, globally, without exception. This isn't symbolic. This is strategic. It sends a clear message. You are no longer part of us. The real battle isn't legal. It's personal. So let's dig deeper. Because this isn't really about Invictus. It's about control. It's about the crown. And it's about a father, a son, and a daughter-in-law who reportedly sees the monarchy as more of a brand than a bloodline. Sources close to Buckingham Palace say Charles had been watching, waiting, observing Meghan and Harry's every move, how they branded themselves, how they partnered with Netflix, Spotify, even how they named their children. Every press release, every public appearance, every word in Harry's memoir, all of it, piling up in Charles's mind until one day, he'd had enough. And insiders say the breaking point was an email. A single message from Harry, allegedly requesting clarification on whether he and Meghan could formally resume usage of HRH during their Invictus 2027 appearances in the UK. Charles's response. This final verdict. A formal, public, irrevocable NO. The Invictus Games, the wrong place to pick a fight? Think about the optics. The Invictus Games have always been Harry's most noble creation. A celebration of sacrifice, of resilience, of honor. And now, they're ground zero in a battle between duty and drama. Because 2027 isn't just any year. It marks 10 years since Harry first hosted the Invictus Games in London. It was a proud moment. For veterans. For the crown. For Harry himself. But what happens when that very crown decides you no longer represent it? What happens when the king says, you may have founded it, but you no longer speak for it? And what happens when you try to show up anyway? Meghan's role, the silent catalyst. Now let's talk about Meghan. Because behind every headline about titles and HRH disputes lies another question entirely. Was Meghan planning something bigger? Reports began surfacing in late 2026 that Meghan's production team had been quietly scouting locations in London and Birmingham, two of the host cities for Invictus 2027, not for royal coverage, but for content. Allegedly, her team had been preparing to document her and Harry's return to the UK under the theme, Reclaiming Service. Yes, reclaiming, as in, taking back what they felt was stolen. That alone would have ruffled feathers. But paired with a subtle HRH usage, say, on a press badge, an invitation, or a Netflix title card, that could have looked like an ambush. A direct challenge to royal authority. Charles wasn't about to let that happen. Not again. The public reaction. Shock, division, and satisfaction. The reaction was swift. Some were outraged. How could a father do this to his son? Others cheered. Finally, the monarchy fights back. One British headline screamed, "Final cut. Charles ends HRH saga once and for all." Online, it was chaos. Sussex supporters accused Charles of cruelty. Royalists applauded his firmness. But one voice was noticeably silent. Harry. And that silence? It said everything. Because according to insiders, Harry had hoped to avoid another public row. He wanted to wear the uniform again, to stand with veterans, to remind the world of what he once was, a prince with purpose. But the verdict crushed that dream, and the silence that followed was louder than any statement. A family in public, a war in private. So what happens now? Sources claim Meghan is furious, not just at Charles, but at the system, at the public, at the refusal to forget the past and move on. Harry, on the other hand, is said to be devastated. He believed that time would heal the rift, that Invictus might be his olive branch, that one event could show his father and the world that he still deserved to be seen as royal. But time didn't heal. It hardened. And now, there's no olive branch, only scorched earth. What's at stake? Because this isn't just a title dispute. This is about legacy, about monarchy, about the rules of power, and who gets to bend them. The HRH style has always symbolized more than just prestige. It's a tether, a chain, a mark of belonging. And now, that chain has been severed. Officially, permanently. And the timing isn't coincidental. It's intentional. Because the one thing the monarchy fears more than bad press is a rogue royal stealing the stage during a global event held on their own turf. That can't happen. Not in 2027. Not in the UK. Not under King Charles. The story has just begun. And yet, this is only the beginning. Because what Harry and Meghan do next could define not just their reputations, but the monarchy's future. Will they defy the verdict? Will they still show up? And if they do, will the world watch a royal event or a royal disaster? Because what comes next could tear everything apart. Even the games themselves. Even the crown. What if the most devastating blows are dealt long before the cameras even start rolling? Before the headlines? Before the drama? Before the world even knows what's happening? Because in the royal family, silence doesn't mean peace. It means preparation. And King Charles? He was preparing. Let's rewind to just after the Queen's funeral. The nation mourned. The family stood in formation. Heads bowed. Faces unreadable. But behind closed doors, plans were already being drawn. You see, most people assumed the dust was settling. That the Megxit scandal, the Oprah interviews, Spare, and the Spotify deal gone wrong were all just blips in the royal radar. A rough chapter, now closed. But Charles knew better. He knew the Sussexes weren't done. He'd been warned by advisors, by legal experts, by his own instincts. Harry and Meghan were waiting. Biding time. Watching. And when the Invictus Games were announced to return to the UK in 2027, Charles didn't flinch. At least, not in public. But in private, he acted. Quietly. Strategically. Because unlike his son, King Charles doesn't broadcast his moves. He plots. The preparation begins. Months before the final verdict became public, the groundwork was already in motion. Charles summoned a series of high-level meetings. Not at Buckingham Palace. Not even at Windsor. But at his private residence at Highgrove. Far from the press. Far from staff leaks. It was there, insiders say, that the decision was first whispered. Not declared. Not documented. Whispered. Should we make it permanent? Do we need to draw the line officially? Before they cross it again? Because make no mistake, the royal family never forgot the damage. The Netflix docuseries. The memoir. The interviews. The accusations of racism, of neglect, of cruelty. These weren't just family squabbles. They were nuclear-level PR disasters. And Charles had swallowed them all, silently, publicly reserved, privately rattled. But when whispers turned to strategy, one voice stood out in those early meetings. Camilla, the Queen consort. According to insiders, she didn't shout. She didn't push. She simply asked a question that changed the room. What happens when they step onto that UK stage with HRH printed next to their names? Silence. Because even the most optimistic aides knew the answer. If Harry and Meghan appeared in 2027 bearing royal styles, be it on badges, banners, or press kits, it would look like forgiveness, like reinstatement, like surrender. And Charles doesn't surrender. Not anymore. The legal labyrinth. Now here's where it gets tricky. Technically, Harry and Meghan had never been stripped of their HRH titles. They just weren't using them. A subtle distinction, but in royal law, everything is subtle. To completely ban someone from using the HRH style, there needs to be legal basis. Constitutional framing. Palace precedent. It's not like revoking a Twitter badge. It's not even like firing someone. This is monarchy. Centuries of tradition. Generations of hierarchy. But Charles had something powerful on his side, the royal prerogative. And as king, he had the authority to do what even the Queen once hesitated to do. Draw the line. With ink. And authority. So he called in the Royal Legal Committee, a group of shadowy advisors who specialize in everything from palace law to constitutional loopholes. They were tasked with one mission. Find the cleanest, quietest way to lock HRH behind glass. Forever. And they found it. A legal clause buried in an update to the letters patent from the 1917 era, modernized slightly after World War II. It gave the reigning monarch authority to suspend and permanently bar usage of royal styles under specific conditions: damage to the crown, public controversies, and betrayal of national dignity. Betrayal. What a word. But the palace knew what it meant, and Charles was ready to use it. The father and the king. Let's pause here, because you're probably wondering, how does a father do this to his son? How does Charles, a man who once stood awkwardly yet proudly at Harry's wedding, who watched him serve in Afghanistan, who saw him break down after Diana's death, how does that man turn around and say, no more, no more HRH, no more royal standing, no more illusion of belonging? It's simple. He didn't do it as a father. He did it as a king. Because every time Harry gave another interview, Charles wasn't just listening as a parent. He was watching the walls of Buckingham Palace bend under the pressure. He was watching public trust erode. He was watching the crown, the very institution he waited his whole life to lead, mocked on talk shows and torn apart on streaming services. And a line had to be drawn. It wasn't just about punishing Harry and Meghan. It was about saving the monarchy. But the king underestimated one thing. Harry was planning a return. And not just any return. A symbolic, full-circle comeback. Right on Charles's front lawn. The Sussex PR machine ramps up. While Charles plotted in silence, Harry and Meghan were moving too. And loudly. Sources inside UK media circles began reporting a sharp uptick in Sussex-related calls from PR reps around late 2026. Publications that once held frosty relations with Meghan's camp were suddenly receiving polished pitches, invites to exclusive sit-downs, and vague offers of early access to something big. Even more telling, leaked internal schedules from a major lifestyle magazine suggested a special Invictus 2027 feature was being developed, with Harry and Meghan front and center. Images of the pair walking through past games, hugging wounded veterans, sharing laughs and tears. The message was clear. This was their event, their legacy, their stage. And some insiders say they were already preparing branding, logos, posters, even video content that featured the HRH styling in small print. Harmless? Not to the crown. Not with Charles's name attached to the very government welcoming the games. Not when the world would see that as a quiet approval. No, this wasn't branding. This was provocation. The last straw, a message arrives. According to a highly placed source, the final straw came in the form of a private email, sent not through royal channels, but via a Sussex aide to the palace's external relations office. It was labeled urgent. The content? A formal inquiry, believed to have been drafted by Meghan's legal team, asking whether the Duke and Duchess of Sussex would be allowed to utilize full hereditary styling at public-facing Invictus events. Hereditary styling was code. They wanted the HRH back. If only for a few weeks. If only in name. But to Charles, it was a test. A chess move. And he didn't hesitate. He called for the final draft to be prepared. He summoned 3 senior aides. He signed the verdict. And he made sure the announcement would be public. Not leaked. Not speculated. Published. Stamped by the Crown. Delivered to every media outlet in the UK and abroad. The wording? Cold. Clinical. Ruthless. HRH styling shall not be used or referenced by the Duke and Duchess of Sussex at any present or future engagement, including but not limited to Invictus Games 2027. No wiggle room. No exemptions. Not even for the veterans. The calm breaks. And just like that, the storm began. The press went wild.